Hello, everyone. This is Sasha from the LTRC. Thank you for joining us for 4 intake mistakes law firms are making with our sponsor, Kenect, as part of the LTRC Industry Insight Series held every Wednesday. Our speaker today is McKay Allen. McKay Allen is the VP of Marketing at Kenect. Kenect is the text messaging platform for more than 3,000 law firms throughout the US and Canada. It allows law firms to send and receive text messages from their business phone number, request Google reviews via text, conduct video chats, text with clients, streamline intake, and even generate more leads on their website. McKay lives in Salt Lake City with his wife and 2 children. Thank you all for joining us. We'll now begin the webinar.
Sasha, thank you. I appreciate it. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully we can make this work. You're never quite sure with these things. Hopefully you're all seeing that. So thanks for jumping on, everybody. We appreciate it. As Sasha said, my name is McKay Allen. I'm on the marketing team at Kenect, and we're grateful to be here today and to share this data with you. So some background quickly on the data you'll see today, and then also on Kenect. So what we'll do is we'll spend maybe 4 or 5 minutes talking through who Kenect is and what we do, and then dive into the intake data. So we conducted a study with about 400 law firms to determine the biggest intake mistakes that they're making. So what you're going to see today are the actual mistakes these firms indicated they themselves are making with intake, and how they plan to solve them. So we'll dive through those mistakes, and then we'll dive how to solve those mistakes as well. I'm not a huge fan of webinars that are like 60 minutes long. So we'll try to keep this short, keep it to 30 minutes or so, plus whatever questions you have. So with that, why don't we get started? First and foremost, who is Kenect? We are based outside of Salt Lake City, as Sasha said. We're a text messaging platform built for law firms throughout North America. We work with several thousand law firms, about half of which are small law firms with 1 or 2 employees, and then the other half are large law firms. So it really works for a variety of different firm types. Essentially what we do is we take your main law firm phone number, the number you have, the number you use, the number you make phone calls to and from, and we allow that number to be textable. So essentially you can send and receive text messages to and from that number just like you would a cell phone. But the beauty of that is you don't need to give out your personal cell number. You don't need a new phone for people or something. All you do is log into Kenect, and you can send and receive text messages to and from that main law firm phone number that you have. This allows you to communicate really efficiently. It allows you to generate new leads because we put a little text us button on your website. It allows you to conduct video consultations, which is really cool, and then also drive online reviews. We also integrate with the leading case management systems in the industry. You can see a list of those here. And those integrations are pretty robust. They share contacts back and forth. They share conversations back and forth. Most firms, because of how good these integrations are, actually use Kenect to help them with intake. And then they find out like, oh, it helps with reviews, and it helps with communication, and it helps with getting payments, and it helps with all sorts of things. So, but really the integrations with these CMS systems are powerful. So how do we do it? Two-way text messaging for your firm, so you can stop giving out your personal cell number, web leads straight from your website, video chat for virtual consultations, and then online review generation and reputation management as well. All right, why texting? Look, you can read these stats on the screen. They're pretty crazy. I think the one that's the craziest probably is the 98% rather of text messages are opened. Compare that to email, which is like 10 to 12% of those are opened. So it really is a game-changing technology with reaching people. I would simply say this: texting is the way we communicate today, for better or worse. I would bet half of you are texting somebody right now, right? And that's not bad. That's the beauty of texting, is that you don't need to step away from what you're doing to respond or to read what you have received. So this is a powerful way to engage with people. Your clients want to text you. You've got to let them. But I've also heard horror stories from every attorney I've ever talked to about giving out their personal cell. This allows you to see the benefits of texting without giving out that personal cell phone number. It's just the way we communicate today. It's the way people want to communicate with businesses. And if your firm's not allowing people to text you, you're missing out on business. How does it work? You simply log into the Kenect texting inbox, and you can send and receive text messages to and from that main number. It's just a great way to engage with people and communicate with people. Okay. You also can download the Kenect mobile app and send and receive text messages from there as well. This is on your phone, but you just send the messages through the Kenect mobile app. You can specify replies, you can create templates, you can send photos, videos, attachments, request payments, invite to video chat, etc. We also capture all the messages that come in from Facebook and Instagram as well as your website. We add a little text us button to your website if you want it that will allow you to even get more leads. You can see what happens to leads when that happens. They explode. You will get more leads if you do that. You can also customize the fields that are on here. So if you have multiple departments, you can specify exactly what they're seeing and what you want them to see. And this is really effective to generate or to do intake. It's just a really effective way to generate intake quickly. All right, top 8 ways firms use Kenect. Intake is probably the most common one, but also sending case updates, collecting fees, video chatting, sending and receiving photos, videos, PDFs, attachments, generating reviews, all that stuff are ways that firms use Kenect. Okay, now I mentioned the intake data that we're going to share today. I'm going to share 6 bullet points or 5 bullet points, I think it is, and I'm going to talk through each one. I encourage you to ask questions as we go. If you have any questions, please type those into the little Q&A area. I'll be able to see those, read them, and answer them as we go. This data was taken from a survey we conducted with about 400 firms, as I said. Half of those were our clients, half were not. But this is the full result from all of it. So number 1, the biggest challenge firms had with intake was not knowing or adhering to an intake process. So I'm interested for everybody, go into the little Q&A area and type in whether or not that's an issue at your firm, is not knowing or adhering to a process for intake. Because this was the most common answer. And this surprised us. We expected it to be more like this specific aspect of intake was a challenge, but not knowing or adhering to a process at all was the biggest challenge for firms. And that's a huge deal. That's a really, really dramatic, I think, answer. So as we dug into the answer that these firms gave us, here's a few things we learned. Number 1, we found out that these firms indicated that if they had multiple employees, those employees generally were not aligned with one another on how intake was to occur. So if you have 8 people total at your firm, and we were to ask 6 of them who what the intake process is, you'd probably get blank stares from 4 or 5 of them, and then you would get 4 or 5 of them would tell you different answers than the other people, right? Everybody would have a different answer. So the first issue was them simply not knowing or adhering to a process. And this was a massive issue. It was an issue for 75% of the firms. And those of you typing in are agreeing. So Kristen says, because clients present so differently, I tend to fall into trying to be responsive versus requiring clients to fit into a templated process. Yeah, so great point. So you're trying to serve the client and give them exactly what they need. And in that process, you actually kind of lose what your intake process is. So here's some recommendations on how to solve this. First is sit down with your team, anybody who deals with intake at all, and determine the exact process that you should have. This might take 2 or 3 weeks of meetings. This might take a lot of discussion, but what is the actual process? Do you need them to fill out a form? Do you fill out the form for them? Does that form get put into your case management system? Do you not have a case management system? Do you gather all that information with texting, which is actually really good because it integrates with your case management system? What are the ways to properly capture intake information and conduct intake? The second aspect of this process is ensuring everybody adheres to it. Now, you can do this in a couple of different ways. One of the things we do, and now this is, I know, a different world, so forgive me if the analogy doesn't make sense completely. So we use Salesforce.com at Kenect, and every tech company uses Salesforce.com. And what we generally do, and what I've seen the best organizations do in my career, is they will say, look, if it's not in Salesforce, it doesn't exist. Salespeople can't get paid on a deal if it's not in Salesforce. Marketers don't get credit for a lead if it's not in Salesforce. I would suggest strongly being that rigid at your firm. Someone does not get credit for a case. They don't get assigned a case. They don't get to work a case. They don't get to bill for a case If it's not in the case management system and it's not inputted in a proper way, the intake is not done properly. You've got to make sure you have a process. You've got to make sure everybody knows the process, and you've got to make sure the process is adhered to. And the only way to do that at the start is to have either a carrot or a stick, right? And then pretty quickly people will adhere. So I would just sit down as a group. I mean, I'm going to try to provide an action item to each one of these as we go. Sit down as a group, whoever needs to be in that meeting, and define what your intake process is. Write it down, make sure everybody knows it, and then make sure everybody adheres to it. You probably have to have refreshers every quarter. You're going to have trainings, but you've got to make sure that there's a templated process that clients fall into. Now, Kristen's question is really interesting, which is, you're saying, Kristen, like I tend to fall into trying to be responsive versus requiring clients to fit into a process. I would suggest that if the process does not allow for responsiveness, it's probably not the right process anyway. So there shouldn't be a conflict, that's the word. There shouldn't be a conflict between having responsiveness and having a process. The process should allow for responsiveness. Okay, number 2, this one I thought was really crazy that this was the second most common result. It was over 60% said that not attracting enough new clients to build a process was their issue. So in other words, they have so few new clients that there's no real need or desire to build an actual process because there's not enough clients to have a process. That's pretty concerning, right? So not having enough new clients is an issue. Now, I would love to get your thoughts on this. Go to the Q&A area and just type in whether or not that's an issue. Like, are you having an issue with new client acquisition? Are you getting enough new clients to be able to even have a process that's effective? Or because you're not getting enough new clients, is there not even an issue with intake, right? Because you're not getting enough new clients to begin with. So I would just, I wonder if this is an issue for you. So go to that Q&A area. Now, here's what I would suggest here. Now, granted, I'm biased because we are a tool that helps firms get Google reviews. So I admit that I'm biased, but we believe Google reviews are the most important marketing activity that you can engage in as a law firm. Let me say that again. Getting Google reviews are the single most important activity you can engage in as a law firm for marketing. Now, of course, you need a great website. Of course, you need social media presence, right? But if you're not getting Google reviews, none of that matters. And here's why. Google determines who they're going to show in the order they're going to show your results based on the firms that have reviews and star ratings. So if you don't have reviews and star ratings, it's going to be darn near impossible for people to find you because Google shows your firm based on the number of star ratings and reviews that you have. So if you don't have any, you're not going to be in that top 3 or 4, and 98% of the clicks that happen when somebody searches are in those top 3 or 4. So if you're not getting enough new clients to build a process, you've got to get more Google reviews. Now, why do I say Google reviews, not Yelp reviews or Avo reviews or Facebook reviews? Because everyone goes to Google first when they want to find a business. It's that simple. Everyone goes to Google first when they want to find a business. Do they do some research on those other sites? Absolutely. But 98% of Americans go to Google first when they want to find a business. So if you're not showing up on Google, you're not showing up anywhere. All right, number 3. Failure to consistently gather contact information. This one was so surprising to me. This one surprised me, I guess, more than the others, simply because it was like, wait, why would we fail to gather contact information? Isn't that one of the principal parts of intake? I'd love your thoughts on this one. So is this an issue, and if so, why? Why is this such a big issue, gathering contact information, consistently gathering the same and accurate contact information? Please go to the question area and type in like whether or not this is an issue, because it was a major issue for the firms that we talked to. Now, when we asked the firms why specifically this was a problem, they said a couple of different things. Number 1, they had never actually gotten any direction from partners or from who's ever in charge of the intake process about what to gather. So they just got they gathered what they thought was good, like first name, last name, what's the issue, what's your phone number, address, just baseline stuff, but they never actually had a discussion as a firm about what contact information they're trying to gather. That was a really core problem. The second thing that we learned was that there was no consistency about how to gather it. Do you gather it over the phone? Do you have them fill out a form? Do you fill out a form? Do you text and have them reply with the information so it's written down? What do you do, and who puts that in the case management system? So this one was, I thought, really interesting because it was something so basic. But again, part of the process here is, I think, sit down as a team, whoever that team needs to be at your firm, and say, what do we need to gather for intake? What are the pieces of contact information we need to gather? You need phone number, obviously. You need an email address. What do you need? Just make sure you understand how to get that information and what you're supposed to get. Number 4 in the survey was no process for initial consultations. So this one I thought made sense. Of all the ones on here, I was like, oh, this one makes sense. So what we heard from these firms, and again, please type in, I'd love to hear your thoughts, was some firms had confusion about, okay, who does the initial consultation? Does the intake person do it right then as they're gathering the information? Do we schedule an appointment for the next day or later that afternoon or a week from then for an appointment with an actual paralegal or attorney? Do we have them come into the office? Do we do a Zoom call? Do we do it just over the phone? What is the actual process for an initial consultation? And I think COVID made this worse, right? Because during COVID, it was like, well, we got to do Zoom. Well, now that you're kind of back to some sort of normalcy, I think everybody's wondering what the standard process is. And that's kind of what we heard in the survey, was that there was no real process. Now, here's what we recommend. Here's something that we would suggest that you do. So first is, we would suggest you do it immediately. If you're trying to get them to set up an appointment for a week out, 2 days out, 3 days out, whatever it is, you run the risk of them just not showing up and taking their business to another firm. That is like sales 101. If you've got them on the phone, don't let them get off the phone without getting what you need from them. Because if you do, there's a risk that there's another firm who can help them that day and they go to that firm. So I would suggest you conduct that consultation as quickly as you can. The other thing I would suggest is consider using Kenect video chat. So while you're texting them, right? Because most people, if you give them the option to text, are going to text. That's what we see. So if you give them the option to text, they're going to do that. While you're texting them, you can send a link. You click on the link, they click on the link, and you can do that live video chat instantly. That is a great way to do that chat right then, as opposed to having to send a calendar invite with a Zoom link, which people seem to be really confused by, as opposed to just literally a link popping into the text thread they're already in. So just use that. It's considerate because it's really effective for firms to do this. There's no additional software required to run those video chats. It's easy for your team. It's easy for your client. You can conduct a ton of initial consultations with this, and that's what a lot of firms we work with are doing. So that is, I think, a massive factor. Kristen makes a great point. She says, I'm okay on initial consultation. Discovered during COVID that in-person takes so much longer when you're giving free too much time. Yeah, you can usually get the information you need on a call. So I would suggest going that direction. And the number 5 here that you can see on your screen is failure to set expectations. This one showed up in a lot of different ways. So here's what they meant by that as we dug in. Number 1 was expectations around success of the case. There was no expectation set in the intake process about what the client could expect in terms of how much money they were going to win, if they could win the family law matter, if they, whatever your area of law practice is. There was a failure to set expectations early on in the discussion. Make sure you include that as part of your intake process. The other thing that firms failed to set expectations on was their communication cadence. So your clients expect you to be 24/7 their lawyer. Family attorneys, this, they also expect you to be their marriage counselor and their child psychologist and 30 other things. You've got to set expectations about how frequently you're available to them and the scope of what you're going to do for them. Because if that gets out of whack at the start, that's a recipe for an unhappy client and an unhappy attorney. A really, really clear path to failure if you fail to set those expectations up front. Now, I should say, if you allow texting at your firm and you give every attorney the Kenect app on their phone, on their own personal phone, if they can download the Kenect app, texting your clients becomes a lot easier than having to call them or to text them from your personal cell, which you don't want to do. Using your personal cell number, I should say. So, some of the communication issues are eased with texting a lot, but you still have to set expectations around scope of what you'll do. And then the third area of expectations that you've got to set at the outset is how much effort is going to be expected from the client. How many times have you talked to a client and they're surprised that actually them having an attorney takes effort from them, right? They have to get paperwork to you. They have to get evidence to you. They have to give testimony. This is going to take hours and hours of their life as well. And a lot of clients, especially those who've never, dealt with the legal system before, are totally shocked by this, right? Like they think they should have one call with you and you fix their problems and it's done. So make sure you set expectations in those areas as part of the intake process. Okay, I want to just show one more thing here, and then we can take whatever questions you have. I've mentioned texting before, and we're getting a few questions on this. Just to be really clear, you don't need to change your firm's phone number. You don't need to get a bunch of new cell phones for people, that kind of thing. They can use the cell phone they have now, and all you've got to do is log into Kenect, and you can send and receive text messages with Kenect to and from your main firm phone number. So you log into the mobile app or you log into a desktop version, and that allows you to do that. Okay, a couple more things and then we'll be done and take whatever questions you got. I just wanted to go through this case study. This is a law firm called Carey, Leisure and Neal based in Tampa. They started using Kenect as an intake tool, but now it's solved a ton of problems for them. They use video chat that initiates with a single text for their intake. They have seen an 82% increase in Google reviews. They are texting their clients constantly. It is a great way for firms to get more leads, to communicate with clients, to streamline intake, and perhaps most importantly, to constantly and immediately get more Google reviews. So it's just a really good tool for a lot of different firms. So with that, I told you we'd be done in around 30 minutes. We're sitting at about 25 by my watch. So if you are interested, if you have any more questions, just text us at this number. We'd love to do a quick demo with you. It can really help streamline your intake. Firms use us for that reason and then find out it does a ton more than that. So if it works for you, that's awesome. If not, that's awesome too. But give us a text, give us a call, same number, and we'll see if it works for you. So with that, Sasha, let's send it back to you and we'll get everybody back to their day.
Thanks, McKay. That looks like all the time we're going to have for today. I would like to thank our sponsor, Kenect, and all of you for attending our webinar today as part of the LTRC Industry Insight Series. If you are curious about future webinars, you can go to the ABA LTRC page or follow our Twitter at LTRC for updates. I would also like to thank McKay for presenting today. You can keep up with Kenect at GoKenect on Twitter or Kenect.com.
Awesome, Sasha.
Thank you for attending, everyone. We will now conclude the webinar. Thanks, McKay.